What the Actual Fork podcast is co-hosted by two intuitive eating registered dietitians, yours truly, Sammy Previtt, owner of Fine Food Freedom, and Jenna Warner, owner of Happy, Strong, Healthy. We can't stand diet culture bullshit and love keeping it real. Our mission is for all humans to believe that they are made for so much more than chasing a smaller body. We are also here to share with you that food can be fun and pleasurable again. Although we are medical professionals, we are human too. We are not afraid to share our deepest, darkest secrets and how years of our lives were taken by diet culture. We started this podcast so no human has to feel alone in their journey towards food freedom. So get comfy and join us for a casual convo where you can expect to laugh, cry, learn, and grow.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What the Actual Fork podcast. This is just Jenna on the intro right now, but Sam is in the episode. Don't you guys worry. We had a tropical storm that hit Florida right in the middle of the episode. So don't you worry. We didn't miss a beat. It's all an incredible episode with Miss Colleen Christensen at no.food.rules on Instagram, who I am sure you guys know. She has 250,000 followers and is absolutely killing it. We love everything that she posts and shares. And this episode today was really incredible. A little bit about Colleen first. Colleen is a registered dietitian who believes in the power of food freedom. Through her social media channels, blogs, videos, and incredibly popular membership community, the Society, which is EAT in the middle there, she helps women to stop dieting and start fueling their bodies intuitively without food rules. Well, another play on words. As a dietitian, Colleen knows the importance of nutrition, but also that an unhealthy obsession can be detrimental to our health. Finding the quote unquote balance we're all striving for isn't a mystical unicorn. It's 180% within everyone's reach, and Colleen guides and inspires others to find this style of food freedom that feels good mentally and physically. And truly, the episode today, we talked about food rules. We've never actually defined what a food rule is and how to break them on our podcast. And so we had the expert on that discussing it today. And we talked about sneaky food rules, and we talked about gentle nutrition, and we talked about how intuitive eating is not just about eating donuts. We talked about how social media has distorted the idea of intuitive eating and how to really understand what it truly means. And my personal favorite aspect of this episode is something that I believe very, very strongly in. And we talked about how to make food fun again, how to bring fun back into the kitchen, how to enjoy food and cooking. And she gives some really incredible examples of how she has brought that back into her own life. And now that I've just told you everything that we talked about in this episode, which is not true because there are some surprises in there, I just am excited for you guys to hear it. And I'm excited to hear your response from it. Colleen is an absolute expert, and she does such a great job of breaking down all of these topics for us. So without further ado, as Sammy would say, enjoy this episode with No Food Rules. Welcome back, everyone. We didn't use our hand raising this time. That's all right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What the Actual Fork podcast. We have the one and only No Food Rules here today, Miss Colleen Christensen. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, awesome. We're so excited to have you here. And Sammy and I promise that we're going to be better about not talking over each other now.
I got some weird message whenever you hit record, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to do something, and something popped up. So we're just rolling with the punches today.
Love it. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to chit chat with you.
Yes, we are so excited to have you here. As we were just saying off air, it's been so cool in our anti-diet online community to just see all of the accounts growing. And yours is one that I remember when you were the mitten dietitian,
oh my gosh,
back in the day. And now you're No Food Rules and you have a massive community. So it's been so cool to see. So would love for those who maybe are just hearing about you now, which I'm sure all of our listeners know who you are.
I was going to say very few.
Yeah. But for those who maybe are more new to your page, if you don't mind just sharing with us, Colleen, like what has been your story of growth? Like, have you always been this no food rules dietitian? Like, how did you get to where you are today, personally, professionally? What is your story?
Yeah. So like I said, thank you guys for having me. And it's just like you said, it's just been so interesting to see everyone grow. I mean, just the community as a whole. I mean, I remember you guys from years ago, and it's just crazy to see how everyone also stays connected and supports each other along the way. So me, I am Colleen. I am a non-diet intuitive eating dietitian, and where do I even start? My work today, first of all, I never envisioned this to be something that I would make my career. It was kind of something that I just kind of fell into, and throughout my own struggles, I kind of figured out that, I need to step into that role and be the person that I felt like I didn't have, that could have really just honestly helped me become an intuitive eater, find food freedom faster. So that's kind of how I got here today. So kind of my history with food is I never really had an issue with food. I had a very good relationship with food and body up until college. And I feel like this is like, we hear this story, like the same story over and over. It's always at a kind of like a turning point in our lives whenever, and I always say this, is that food and body image are a coping mechanism. So if we all kind of link it back to when it started, it's typically around a life change or a life event or something like that. And for me, it was college. It was, I mean, as I was going for dietetics, and you guys know that's very rigorous, very competitive. And it turned into my kind of coping mechanism, right? So restricting food, I got very controlling with my food. It ended up controlling me. And it kind of started off being very restrictive. And then I knew after a couple years, I was like, this is just not healthy. This is not sustainable. It really got to the point where I looked forward in my life and was like, I can't keep doing this forever. Like if I I always kind of paint this picture of, I wanted to be able to be married and have kids and sit down for a pancake breakfast and pour the maple syrup and have the whipped cream and all that stuff. And, take my kids out for ice cream and whatnot. And that was just, I couldn't happen with the food rules that I had. So I knew that something had to change. And then I felt like, again, like I didn't have anyone there that really got it. I did work with some dietitians, worked with, therapists. And again, it was just like, I felt like no one really got it. And I really struggled. I went from the restrictive side of things to the binge eating side of things. And now I know like that's totally normal. It's, a biological response. But at the time, I thought I was going crazy. I was just so restrictive. And now I'm like binge eating so much food. And it just, I felt out of control. I felt honestly crazy because I didn't understand. And then after years of, working through this, stumbling upon the intuitive eating book, lots of trial and error to figure out what worked, what didn't, then I started to make progress with my relationship with food, my body. And at that point, I was starting to feel pretty good about it. Again, I did not envision this being my career. I was actually working as a pediatric dietitian with inborn errors of metabolism. So very, very specific genetic disorders, very fascinating, but I kind of knew all along it didn't light me up. And then the more comfortable that I got with my journey and was like, wow, again, those years of trial and error and struggle, could have really been kind of sped up if I had a little bit more guidance in this and I wasn't taking 5 steps forward and 4 steps back. And I started to get into the kind of the social media thing. And I was posting what I thought people wanted me to post, nutrition information, what you'd kind of expect from a dietitian, but it just didn't necessarily feel aligned. And again, the more comfortable that I got with my story, then I started posting about it. So you mentioned Mitten Dietitian. Mitten Dietitian was kind of the mitten. I'm from Michigan, shaped like a mitten. So that's where that name came from. But the more comfortable that I got with my story, I started to kind of share more glimpses of that. And that's when people were like, wow, like I resonate with that. Tell me more about how you were able to overcome that. And it was kind of a slow progression from kind of the general nutrition information to sharing more of my story and the steps that I took to get here. But the more that I did it, the more authentic I felt. The more, again, I was like, this is what I didn't have. And I saw the impact that I was making on people's lives. And it just kind of kept snowballing from there. I mean, you guys know how it is with social media. You start to build this thing and you just feel the sense of just gratitude for it all and wanting to help others get to this place. And that's really what lights me up. So that's what I've made my career into today, helping others find this idea of food freedom that feels good, both mentally and physically. Finding, I hate the term balance because I feel like we're always striving for something when in reality, it's more of like fluidity and things can ebb and flow, but just finding what feels good and learning to enjoy food again. And I feel like I'm just like rambling because I could literally talk about this forever because it lights me up, but that's kind of my spiel in general about how I got here.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that path with
Yes.
us.
So Sam and I have been scrolling your Instagram and just there's so many different topics that we want to talk about today. But honestly, I feel like we have to start with no food rules, right? So
Yes.
that's who you are. That's what you stand behind. You have a specific post about sneaky food rules, but I don't think that we've ever actually covered in an episode, like what are food rules and like what can they look like for people and how can we help people identify what some of them that, and we talk about this a lot, that, oftentimes the issue is so many of these food rules are so normalized by the public that people don't actually know that they're problematic. So for you, when you're talking with clients about maybe identifying their food rules first, like how does that look in those conversations?
Yeah. So typically kind of the way that I describe a food rule is what is really when you allow external information like diet plans, tips, advice, those things that you've gotten to be kind of like the sole determinant of your food choices or your feelings about food. And really you you have all these external reasons for your food choices and you've lost touch with kind of the internal part. And the way that I kind of explain intuitive eating, because you might be like, well, Colleen, like, I know this piece of information about nutrition, it's good for my health. Really, for me, food freedom is the merriment of external information and your internal cravings and cues. So it's not that external information, we just, throw it to the wayside. It's really the merriment. So when you allow external information to be, like I said, kind of that sole determinant, like, okay, I need to have XYZ on my plate, or I can only eat at this time, or this is, a good or bad food. That's more of that food rule versus, like I said, kind of that merriment of allowing yourself to say, is this what I actually want? Is this something that feels good to me? And really kind of allowing yourself to have a say in it.
I love that. That's so, so important to bring light to. So for people that are listening, that they're like, well, I think I have some food rules, or, where do you start? Is it, and obviously we all kind of walk through this with our clients, but we would love for no food rules to tell the listeners how to have no food rules. So what is your process? Maybe even if you could give a concrete example, right? Of like, okay, here's a food rule and here's how we would break this down together.
Yes, absolutely. So I always say just kind of start with like a brain dump of your food rules. So for instance, is there anything, and this can be a good idea, just to keep like a notes app, open the notes app on your phone and just keep running lists of things. For instance, is there something that you always do at breakfast that you feel like you have to do? Maybe it is, I don't let myself eat till a certain time. I have to, always have certain things on my plate at breakfast. Those are certain things like that throughout the day, or also noticing kind of your belief system about food, because I feel like a lot of people, common food rules, I mean, things like I can, only eat half a banana, or I, have to count out how many crackers I'm eating. Those are more kind of like concrete ones. But there's also the morality food rule. And I feel like people forget about this one a lot. They say, oh, well, I allow myself to eat all foods. I don't tell myself I can't eat that. But if you're viewing a food as good or bad, that again is kind of that morality food rule. So kind of going about your day too and noticing, is there any foods that I'm feeling like, ooh, thoughts that I'm having, ooh, I shouldn't have that, or that's a bad food, or, that's quote unquote unhealthy. Those are things to just kind of take note of. And I kind of say, like I said, just go about your day. And if you are making lunch and you're making a salad, kind of think about that. What would you feel about having a sandwich? Maybe you view bread as, quote unquote bad, or you would say, oh, I could have that, but, only half, or, oh, having 2 slices of bread would be too much. Then those are kind of the food rules, and they're so unique to everyone. And I feel like also when you're first doing this initial brain dump of your food rules, really just kind of view it as a working list. I always say, I want everyone to understand that in this whole food freedom process, taking baby steps is okay. If we try to wait until everything is perfect, or, I'm not going to even start breaking my food rules until I have this perfect list, it's not going to happen. So just get this working list going. Anything that you notice about food throughout that day is a really good starting place. And like I said, you're not going to have a totally complete list. I have, people that I've worked with, and a year from now, they'll be like, wow, I didn't realize I had this food rule, because they had a new experience that they might not have happened in a year. So just kind of get this, just flush them out. And obviously the ones that are going to be the most important are going to be the ones that you're actually encountering on a daily basis. So just get that out there. And then from there, kind of the way that I say to work through food rules is to order them first from easiest to break to hardest to break, and just focus on that first easiest rule. I feel like a lot of times, especially people who struggle with food rules, a lot of times have this kind of like perfectionistic personality. And we want to kind of have this like all or nothing thinking too, like, okay, I'm going to break all these rules at once. But again, just allow yourself to feel, what is it like to break one of your food rules? What comes up? Because that can also kind of guide even more of that insight into your relationship with food. So that's kind of an overview of how I say to first like identify your food rules and then kind of go through breaking them.
I'm like traumatized because you listed 2 of the ones that I used to tell people when I was diet culture Jenna. The half a banana like will haunt me forever. And I think I've mentioned this on a podcast in the past, but I was talking about how I used to work where Sam and I met for a grocery store, and people would come in for free nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl like DM'd me, and she was like, you told me to only have half a banana when I was your client. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like that's one of the worst food rules ever. But that is so helpful. And I think that for a lot of clients and people that I've spoken with in DMs or just in casual conversation, I think the fear or the anxiety around what will eating be like without rules is something that can really overtake and really ruin the food experience. And I know one of the things we wanted to talk about was how to bring fun back into eating again. And so, to connect those 2 things, like how do you really share with people that like you can enjoy food without the rules and feel good and all of those things where they don't even know where to start?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The whole process feels very overwhelming. And that's how I felt too when I was going through this. It was like, okay, so I have to make peace with all these foods. I have to relearn my hunger and fullness. I have to, understand how to implement gentle nutrition without making it obsessive. Like it feels so overwhelming. And I feel like that can be very paralyzing to even get started. And for me, again, it was like one day I was like, okay, we're going to do all of this. And the next day I just was like, so again, kind of like paralyzed. And I just wanted to retreat back to my restrictive tendencies because that's what I knew. That's what felt more comfortable at the time. So again, I really think that it's okay to kind of work through those things and to understand that it won't it won't happen overnight. I mean, we hear this all the time. This is nothing new. It's definitely, I don't love the term journey, but it's what describes it so perfectly, right? I feel like it sounds so cheesy, but it's true. It's this journey that we go through. But to kind of bring that fun with food in, that's like, food is so, it's enjoyable for me now. I love making recipes. I was just in the kitchen. I did a whole recipe testing day on Sunday. My husband was out watching golf and he came home and I was like, this is like my happy place. Like when I made ice cream, I made some muffins, and it was just like, that was just so fun for me to be able to enjoy food again, and not feel like stressed over it. Right. So it's going to be a different relationship with food, and finding a way it's going to be different for everyone too. And just finding the smaller and more enjoyable pieces. So some easy things that people can do are, okay, what kind of toppings can I put on things? What do I enjoy about this food? Really identifying what is it about it that's satisfying to you? Is it that crunch? For me, one thing that we're thinking about bananas now. I've really been loving having in the mornings, like a banana split. So I'll have like a banana, cut it in half, and then I've been putting like blueberry yogurt on it, and then some granola on top, some peanut butter. It is like the most satisfying thing. And it's also fun, and like being able to try different flavors on it and whatnot. And that's just where you kind of get creative. But how did you get to that point? It's like, okay, I found that having a little bit of crunch is really satisfying. Mixing flavors is really satisfying. For me, getting color on, I just made a salad for lunch, and it was like, okay, how much color can I add to this? Because I find that when I see food and it has lots of color in it, that just makes me excited. That makes me enjoy it more. So it's finding those sorts of things to kind of focus on with your food versus the things that we used to, like, again, am I labeling this good or bad? Do I feel like this is on plan, or do I feel like I'm falling off the wagon? It's really viewing food through a different lens.
Well, guys, it's no secret that stresses have been high in our lives. And this is Jenna specifically at this moment speaking about stress. And my stress management routine is something that's super important to me. I often use a gratitude journal, journaling in general, breath work, and I try to do meditation, but I'm really not so great at it. So I've been looking for a new thing or product to add into my stress management routine. And after lots of research, I've found a brand that I'm super excited to share with you guys, Soul CBD. The CBD gummies that I have been trying, that I've added into my stress management routine, are delicious. And after taking them, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm.
And they do taste really good. I love their raspberry flavor, but we're really excited to gift you guys a code so you can get your hand on some of these yummy CBD gummies at mysoulcbd.com/WTAF, and make sure to use WTAF at the code at checkout for 15% off. And I love, you said earlier something, I forget how you stated it, but you were saying like looking at your beliefs with food, and what you're talking about even right now is reminding me of a conversation I had with a client. We were looking at her beliefs about cooking and prepping, and how she grew up in a family where her mom hated cooking, and she kind of had taken on that belief. And so now we're working about like challenging that belief system and kind of breaking that down. And it can be such a joyous thing. Not that everybody has to love cooking, because some people won't, and that's okay. But I think it comes back to just challenging those belief systems. Exactly what you're saying. Just so powerful.
And trying things in a new way too. So even with, like, I was just talking about this with veggies, it's like, let's try something new. So for instance, if you're struggling with cooking, or you're struggling with, I never want to eat a vegetable again in my life. Okay, well, let's think about how can we do this differently, especially if you have cooked a certain way when you were dieting, or you've only eaten certain vegetables when you're dieting. Of course, doing those things might be like, I don't want to do this, because you're associating associating it with dieting, or you're associating it with a time in your life when you had a certain relationship with food. So, okay, maybe we try, different recipes, or we try different ingredients, or you try prepping veggies a different way. Someone in my membership community just posted, I have been really struggling with eating veggies. But then I thought, how do I prepare them in a different way? She roasted them. I'm a big fan of air fryer veggies. They are like, air fryer carrots are my jam. They have that like sweetness, that little bit of like caramelization on them. So good. But how can you start to get creative with kind of those things and view them in a different way, just to kind of, like I said, change things up and develop a new relationship with food?
I love this. And I think that what you've really nailed right now, and you have a post that I don't want to open because it has sound on it. So I don't want it to like interfere on here. But like, there are so many misconceptions about intuitive eating and food freedom and foods that we prioritize, right? And you've talked about vegetables in such an exciting and fun and delicious way. And you have a post, it's a reel. So again, I don't want to have it blasting in the background, but about intuitive eating is not unhealthy. And it's in air quotes. And I would love to hear more about that post and how this can all like, just again, tie up this conversation about finding the enjoyment in all foods, including vegetables and others.
Yeah, I feel like, I love social media because it's connected us. We're talking right now, right? But at the same time, it's so easy for the actual messages of things to get lost because, especially, for me, I pretty much use the max characters for every single post, every Instagram post that I do, because there's so much to say. And I want to make sure that I'm actually portraying the information that needs to be given. But let's be real. Most people just look at the picture and, oh, that's a donut. Okay. That's a piece of pizza. That's, mac and cheese. And that's what they get from it. Right. So I understand why people think that like, oh, intuitive eating is, going to make everyone unhealthy. It's just eating donuts all day long. And that's kind of what I call the social media way of intuitive eating. If you are just focusing on the pictures or what you're seeing and you're not taking in the full messaging, because I always use kind of like the Venn diagram. Like, again, it is merriment of the external nutrition information, health knowledge that we have, in our internal cravings and desires. It's really about marrying those. So yes, nutrition information does play a role in it. It's not the only choice or the only part of your decision. And it's just viewing things again in a new way. And I feel like also it's important to understand your why with implementing the nutrition information. So why are you wanting to do this? Is it because it makes you feel good? Is it because you quote unquote think you should? That reflection of understanding why you're making some of your food choices is really huge. And it can feel kind of awkward at first because when we're dieting, diet culture tries to make us not think about our eating choices. And so, okay, here's your plan. This is what you should be following. And when you take time to reflect and understand the true reason, again, is it because it makes you feel good? Is it because you like, the nutrients that you're giving your body? Those things, that's what really allows to kind of have that nutrition information without the obsession to kind of come into play. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Okay.
Absolutely. And I think that comes back to looking at with intuitive eating, right? The challenge the food police principle, where that nutrition informant that used to be a negative voice when we're in diet culture, as we become an intuitive eater and really adopt food freedom, it can become that nutrition ally where the nutrition information is neutral and can be used, like you said, in a positive way. Like us anti-diet intuitive eating dietitians aren't like anti-vegetable. And I think that, or anti-health, just like your post and what Jenna called out. So thank you so much for shedding light on that, because you're right, on social media, that has to be probably one of the main myths about intuitive eating, is that it's anti-health and like anti, air quotes, healthy foods.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's so many places we could go with this, but I feel like you've done such a great job of kind of combining everything together with food rules and kind of how to start breaking them down and bringing fun back to food.
I think there was a storm in Florida for a second.
Oh no.
I'll take over. She'll be back. I
Okay.
think I know where she's going with this, that at the end of each episode, or towards the end of each episode, if we were to bring all of this information together and help our audience take away one key thing. Like, you've gone over so many great pieces about gentle nutrition and no food rules and enjoying food again and cooking and, what intuitive eating really is. But if somebody was just to walk away with one piece of information, whether you have stated it or not already, what would you want that to be? What would be like the big driver?
I think that it's going to look different for everyone in that really you get to decide what feels good for you. And my bottom line is that I believe that everyone deserves to have an eating style that makes them feel good both mentally and physically. So that is really the goal to me. So if, someone's listening to this and it's like, okay, well, how do I get there? Just again, you don't have to, it's not this all or nothing thing. Just dip your toes into the water and say, okay, I'm going to try this, or I'm going to even just follow more Instagram accounts or learn more about it. Pick up the intuitive eating book, do something like that. Just take a baby step forward. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, What About Bob? Oh, it's hilarious.
And now I need to.
He always says baby steps, baby steps. And I'm like, yes, like that's okay. I feel like, especially in today's culture, like we like the extremes, like that's what gets attention. But I find that, sometimes just doing that doesn't work for everyone. That's okay. Take it at your own pace. So I guess that's kind of like big picture, is that you deserve an eating style that makes you feel good mentally and physically. I truly believe that. And again, that's going to look different for everyone. And that's why I always say to people, I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm going to teach you how to eat. I can help guide you with that, but I'm not just going to tell you what to eat, because I'm not you, right? You're going to have to start to do that digging. I can help you understand how to do that. But it's going to, what you feel good mentally and physically with is going to be different than what I do, because we're different bodies, right? So it's kind of like the big picture. And then to understand that it's okay, again, to kind of like take those steps and to say, because it is scary, right? When we are deviating from something that we've been doing for years or decades, it's okay to be like, I'm nervous about this. I feel like this is the right decision, but I'm not totally sure. Just dip your toes into the water. Again, follow accounts, there's so much information on social media, just take in some of that and allow yourself to get comfortable with the process. And I always say, everything's going to snowball, and you just have to start that momentum and start to let it move. But if you never take that first baby step, you're never going to end up like with this, let's use some imagery here, like a 3-foot snowman or something like that. You're not going to end up with that if you never start actually building that snowball. So just take those steps and know that, you don't have to be alone during this process. That is one of the main reasons why I created my membership community, because I felt so isolated when I was going through this. Granted, this was years ago, before intuitive eating was a big thing, which I think is amazing now that there's so many people on this journey too. But know that you don't have to feel alone. And I feel like for me, when I finally found people who I could talk to about this, who are going through the same things that I was, it not only made me feel, like I said, way less crazy than I felt when I was, attempting to do this. But to be honest, it also really helped my relationship with my then boyfriend, now husband, because he didn't feel like he had to fix anything, right? He can't understand this. He's never been in my shoes. He was so supportive, but it took kind of that pressure off of him in our relationship, for me to have a place to go to people who did get it, where I could just vent if I needed to. That was super huge. I know that was kind of like 3 different things, but there's a lot I want people to know.
So so good. I feel like you have such a realistic and, for lack of a better term, like gentle approach to this journey. Sorry.
Yes.
That's so important and it's so refreshing. And I so appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think we could have a whole episode number 2 on this, about the relationship with your partner aspect.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Yes.
huge.
Yes.
We can go on for hours about that one. And maybe we will have to have you back for that part. But you mentioned your membership program, and for people that don't know about that and where to find you, can you steer them in the right direction? Because it sounds like you have so many great things to offer everyone.
Yeah. So the membership community is called the Society, spelled EATY, because we're a society that actually likes to eat.
Thank you so much for listening
play on
to
words there. I
what
love a good little humor in there, but really it is a community where, yes, you have the guidance
you are here
of,
listening
again, kind
with
of like
us.
the
If you
step-by-step
enjoyed this
guidance from
episode,
someone
please
who's
be
been
sure to
there,
subscribe,
but also that
like,
community
share
piece.
with
So
all your
it's
friends
hundreds
and
of women
faves,
coming
and follow
together,
along with
supporting
us
each
on
other.
social
I
at
find that there's so
What's
much
the
value in
Actual
having
Fork
people, again,
Pod.
who have been
We
in
promise
your
to continue
shoes
to bring
more
you the hottest
recently.
topics,
And
greatest
also,
guests,
it's so
and the
beautiful.
most
I
fun
feel
you can
like,
possibly
especially
have
in
while fighting
recently,
diet
we've had a
culture
lot of
bullshit.
members get
We
pregnant.
love you. We
And it's
appreciate
nice
you,
for
and
them
we
to
will
be
see
like,
you next
hey, my
week for a
body's
lot more
changing, you know, I'm
fun.
having different cravings. Can someone who's been in this place help me? We literally have members of all ages, which is amazing. So there's that. And then we have guest expert workshops on just different areas of nutrition that might be helpful every month, mini challenges, just making it fun as part of a community. So again, that's the Society. It's linked on my website. You can check us out on Instagram as well.
I love that. And where can people find you on Instagram?
Yes, and I am at
Just in case.
food.rules.
Just in case they didn't know that already. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. It's going to help so many people, and we cannot wait to share it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.